Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Dr. Michelle Grenier, and I'm from the University of New Hampshire. And I'm happy to be presenting here on teaching students with disabilities in physical education and what it means in school contexts in the United States. So we're going to talk a little bit about inclusion, teaching practices, and the least restrictive environment in this presentation. And as I understand it, I am one of a panel of three. So I hope you enjoy this session. In the United States, we want, as part of our PE programs, students to have the skills to know the implications of and benefits of involvement in physical education. We want them to participate. We want them to be physically fit. And we want them to value physical activity. These are the fundamental and guiding principles for physical education established long ago in the United States. We also have the standards that guide our teaching practices and what students should know. They should know about skills. They should know about tactics, so how to run, change speed, play in a game, so that tactical knowledge is a little bit more higher order thinking. We have skills, higher order thinking. They should know about physical fitness in standard 3. Standard 4, they should be respectful and appreciate, know their behavior. And 5 is for recognizes the value of physical activity for health, enjoyment, and challenge. So standard 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are the guiding principles that underpin physical education. Why do we have these principles? Because long ago, students were excluded, students were institutionalized, students were not allowed in schools. Similar to the Civil Rights Act in the 60s, these were put in place to ensure, to guarantee that individuals with disabilities have a school education and can participate. This falls under IDEA, which is the most recent revision, and it started in 1975. So again, if we look at what happened before that, students were not participating, not even allowed in school. So we needed this legislation to make sure that things happened. What we learn in our understanding of physical education in the United States is physical and motor fitness, so skills, motor skills and patterns such as running, jumping, leaping, skills in aquatic stance and games. That is what physical education is. It's a combination of fitness, lifetime sports, team sports. IDEA, what it says is to the maximum extent appropriate, children with disabilities must be educated with students who are not disabled in the least restrictive environment. Again, I want to repeat that. IDEA does not say exclude. IDEA says include whenever possible. We want our students with disabilities to have access the same as their students without disabilities. And that means the teacher has to work, consider, and think. And when we look at universal design for learning, and when we look at the LERSP, these are all tools that can lead us to enabling and ensuring that our students are educated with their peers and their classmates. Okay, again, general physical education must be made available to every child receiving a free and appropriate education. So the law demands and defines it as such. Important concepts from IDEA. Every student should have an individual education plan. I'm not sure what happens in Turkey, but I know in some countries, the student has a specially designed program of instruction, and hopefully that includes physical education. So IDEA also ensures that students have an IEP, a special plan. Okay. And who qualifies for that, we'll look at that. And it also defines what adaptations and accommodations should be made. Who qualifies? Cognitive impairment, students with hearing impairment, sensory impairment, blindness, emotional disability, orthopedic impairment, autism, traumatic brain injury, learning disabilities, multiple disabilities, and other health impairments. So if a child is identified as having a disability, they qualify under IDEA and they have an IEP. It's a little complicated, but hopefully you understand that there's specially designed instruction given their needs incurred by their disability. Some other things that we consider is person first language. We say a student with a disability. Other important considerations, special education services. Okay, what support does the child need? Related services, occupational therapy, physical therapy. IEP, least restrictive environment, which we're going to go into. So there's some other concepts that are important to know that fall under IDEA. As we talked about the least restrictive environment, this seems to be the key thing in the United States, is where is the student educated, and also how is the student educated. Schools differ by location, depends on what kind of supports, what kind of teachers they have, what their philosophy is towards students with disability. So it can vary widely depending on the schools. And we're going to look at what that is right here. So when we talk about the least restrictive environment, we can talk about the general physical education classroom, or we can talk about an APE or small group of students with disabilities. These are all placements where the student has their physical education program. We can talk about a combination of GPE and APE, so a student can have multiple PE classes. And then we can have a mixed abilities. In the United States, we have what's called a unified program, where students with and without disabilities work together. So the least restrictive environment has many options, and that's important to know. This is a little bit more detailed here, but you have a GPE class with no modifications. This is the least restrictive environment, just the GPE teacher. You can have a setting where the general PE teacher works with an adapted PE teacher. Okay. You can have just the adapted PE teacher in a setting, or you can have a special school. So there are many, many options for the least restrictive environment. And again, what that means. However, if we're looking at inclusion and we're looking at placing children with their non-disabled peers, you need to have supports and services. That means paraprofessionals. Okay? That means a special IEP. What is the learning that needed that is designed for them? Okay. And again, so many of these differences, as we talked about, can impact the student's placement and education. What is the school's philosophy? How have the teachers been trained? The severity of the student's disability will also make a difference. And what type of resources do you have? These are all factors. What we know about inclusion is it promotes friendships, sense of belonging, skill acquisition, learning by modeling. Okay. So in this setting, we've got kids using what we have indoor climbing wall. There are several children with intellectual disabilities or cognitive impairments in there. They've been supported by their peers. They've challenged themselves in ways they might not have challenged themselves. So again, this setting worked well for these children. You might have another child whose more involved needs would require a smaller setting. Okay. But that also doesn't mean that they couldn't have both a smaller setting and a setting in the GPE classroom. If you want to have inclusion, what are the needs? What is the instruction in activities, preparing the general education students and preparing for support personnel? So there's a lot of planning and thought that goes into it, as it does good teaching for any classroom. You know, how can I support my students? How can I make this lesson engaging? How can they best learn? How do I know that they're learning? So these are all questions that we ask. However, there are challenges. There are challenges, as we know. Planning, support, instruction, too many kids in a class, So we know that there's a lot of barriers to effective inclusion. And we talked about the inclusion rating scale. And again, that is a tool that can help you identify some of those barriers or places of improvement. So we're trying to complement what we're talking about here with what we want to do. And again, this IEP process, this is inherent to the United States. Many other countries have it as well. I'm not sure what the status is in Turkey, but student needs to be referred and then assessed, and then a program plan is put in place. And really that document is shared by all teachers so that teachers understand the needs of that child. And when we talk about collaboration, everybody comes to the table to talk about that child's needs. So this is part of what goes on in the United States. Again, that IEP program is really inherent and key to providing the supports that the student does need. Again, some of the things that we've talked about. Where is the student at? What's their present level of performance? What are some goals that they can have? And then how are they assessed? So these are key so that the teacher understands this is where my student is, but this is where I want them to be. Okay, so there's a plan of action, and that IEP is plan of action. So what I've endeavored to give you here is just a snapshot of educational practices within schools in the United States. Key components of that include the law, inclusion as a placement or a practice, how you get supports in order to make that happen, the IEP process. So I want to thank you for your participation, and please don't hesitate to contact me if you have any needs or more questions. All right, I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.